create anything, but they'll mimic, right? And that's where people get really confused, is that they think that they're communicating with these certain beings, but it's a mimicry, it's a false light. They're false beings, they're not even real. And people get real sucked into that. And so there's a false hierarchy that's all based in the desire to enslave and exploit and to seek externally through stealing and manipulation what they cannot create internally. And that's the whole dynamic. If you were to remember anything about the false light and false gods, it's all about that. It's also death-oriented, or as my friend Olivia loves to say, it's a death cult, or it's death-oriented, or it's destructive-oriented. It's self-destructive, and it's to the point where they're so lost that it's like just they just become the embodiment of destruction. And this is where we have satanic like beings, demons, all the dark stuff. And over time, people get if you stay in that energy, you get denser and denser and denser, and you just tether more of your soul, more and more and more, into that level of reality. So, in other words, when you saturate yourself in fear, your entire consciousness changes. It becomes completely different from somebody who is on a different path. And this is why you will have people who are light workers or people who are spiritually oriented, and they're like, I just don't get why someone would be so destructive. Like, I just don't understand why someone would do that to themselves or do that to somebody else. And you just can't get it. That's because even though we all look like human beings here, if you were to look at their energy body and you were to see where their energy system was plugging in and the kind of beings that are around them, it looks completely different than you. You would run in horror, right? Even though we all coexist here, ladies and gentlemen, we're not all plugging into the same higher realms. And when you are plugging into higher dimensions, you can't even fathom why anyone would function that way. It is inferior. And not even from a place of arrogance inferior, just genuinely inferior, energetically, and everything about it. So at the end of the day, that's why there is this schism in the population, is because fundamentally, energetically, spiritually, cognitively, there are different species here. And I really want to nail that home. And that's why being occult illiterate and spiritually illiterate and trying to divorce yourself from your spirit is really a bad idea, because then you have these people who are practicing dark rituals and creating organizations to lead and control the world. And technically, spiritually, you're inferior to them. Why? Because they're occupying and using that little bit of spiritual energy they have. And if you refuse to use yours at all, that's dominant. That's influencing you. If you want to leave your spirit as an empty go-kart, as an empty house, as an empty chair, and they're at least filling their chair consciously, that's more powerful. It doesn't matter if you're a good person. I mean, it does, but esoterically, we have to be responsible for our spirit now. We can't hide from it anymore, because the person who can bring, the people who can bring spirit deeply in their body are going to be the ones that have the most influence. And if you're not bringing it in at all, you're not even in the game. Because if they're bringing something, even if it's dark, at least they're bringing it in their body. They're actually creating a certain magnetism where if you're fractured, that actually beats it. And that's why we have such a problem, is because people just completely avoid learning about this. They completely avoid understanding this, thinking that they're being smart or safe, or they're just being superstitious, and they're actually rendering themselves fractured and vulnerable.
So, can you please speak just a little more on child sacrifice and human traffic happening today, and how this underpins certain dark activities that are in plain sight? Great, great, great question. So, in this season, I really focused in on the child and the use of the child in the ritual, and ritual sacrifice, and just in occult rituals, period. And the reason why I focused in on that is because it is one of the most important dynamics that the dark occult uses. And it is for a very good reason, a very big reason that they use that. The reason being is because when a human being is subject to a great deal of trauma and they're entrenched in fear, their energetic body completely inverts and they actually cannot generate any psychic power. So your psychic power, your power to do rituals, your power to manifest what you want in the world, is directly connected to your inner child. The more damage you have, the more unhealed you are, the less power you have. The more healed you are, the more power you have, the higher you can reach, the higher you can portal, the higher you can stabilize energy, the more dense spiritual energy you can hold in your body. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. It means that the rituals can last longer. The intensity of the connection is easier. So if you have a damaged inner child, if you are a broken person, if you're like a psychopath, if you're scattered in a million pieces, you can't hold a harmonic to do a ritual. You can't hold it. But guess what? You're educated enough to know that the psychic level of consciousness is the most powerful. It's the most influential, okay? Which is why it is so shamed. So you don't have any ability to generate this power on your own. No, because you're broken. So what do? You steal it from kids. You steal it from innocence. You steal it from kids. You replace your broken inner child with an actual child. That's what we're seeing here, okay? That is what we are seeing here. And when you need that on a regular basis, you're going to create syndicates, crime syndicates, that support that intense need. A lot of these individuals who are in these situations, who are into these dark occult practices and positions of power, they are in contact with dark entities that exist within the lower astral spectrum of reality. And so they need that energy generated regularly to connect with those entities in order to get instructions onto what to do next. And this is an intergenerational issue. This is an intergenerational phenomenon. So what happens is that there are plans that exist for society, for the world, for certain factions that have been going on for hundreds of years, these plans playing out, right? What they would like to have happen. They need to get that information from those deities, from those entities, from those false gods. So they need that energy. They need that power. They can't generate it themselves. They don't do the work. So they just harvest the energy to have those connections so they can continue the communication with those beings. And that is why that goes on.